Welcome to Crazy Enough to Win. I'm your host, John Grubbs. Welcome to the show. Now, today we have an amazing guest on today's podcast. He is a world champion, professional hockey player. He is a motivational speaker and an advisor to CEOs. I am honored to call him my friend. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Thanks, John. Great to be here.
Ryan, this show is about going big, doing something crazy. When you look back on your life, what's the craziest thing you have ever done?
Well, there's an on ice crazy, and then there's an off ice crazy. On ice, I remember being in a big scoring slump one year, and I thought, boy, the only way I'm going to get out of this is I'm going to pick the player with the most penalty minutes on the other team, and I'm going to go after him tonight. And that wasn't a good idea. It was against Pittsburgh, and the guy's name was Marty McSorley, and he was their tough guy. So that wasn't very smart of me. I've done lots of crazy stuff. I think off ice, I think that there's been some great stuff that has just sort of worked out. And, I haven't jumped out of airplanes or anything like that, but I'm a risk taker. I like to take risks. So I'd probably have 10 or 12 of those off ice.
Wow. One of my favorite stories that you share is the contrast in National Hockey League locker rooms, winners versus losers. Tell our audience about that experience.
Yeah, when I was first in Washington, so I'm drafted number 2 in the world to the Washington Capitals, very fortunate. Of course, if you're a high pick to a team in the NHL, that means the team's not a very good team. And we were growing, getting better, but the key language in that dressing room sort of centered around blame. And what we do is we talk to cultures and CEOs and executive teams around, what is the language of blame? What do you hear? And I actually know a CEO friend of mine from the Vistage Group, up in British Columbia, and he's a bit of a weird duck. If he hears anybody on his team blaming anybody or anything, he just thanks them very much and sort of ushers them out the door.
Wow.
His point is that if there's blame involved, then what we've done is we've just given our ability to change away. We've offloaded it on somebody else. I got into the Montreal Canadiens dressing room. I was traded there in 1982, and that team had come off 6 Stanley Cup wins in the previous 10 seasons. And in that dressing room, it was much more the language of, I'm accountable and just find a way to win. So it was much more you're taking accountability and you're making it happen. So yeah, I learned a lot about language in professional sport. John, some good news. We've got a book coming out soon.
Yay.
And one of our chapters will be on the performance language, what we say to others and what we say to ourselves.
Wow. And he's being humble, listeners. He was actually drafted number 2 overall in 1978. That's a pretty amazing accomplishment. Were you surprised that you were drafted that high, or was it kind of an expectation going into the draft?
Well, I've got a great story there, John. Great question. I was just having fun playing hockey, and I'm 18 years old, and all of a sudden I'm going into my draft year at 19 in those days, and a scout from the Quebec Nordiques came up to me and said, "Hey, who's your agent?" And I said, "I don't have an agent." And he said, "Kid, you better get an agent." So in my 19th season, I didn't even have an agent. I wasn't ready to be drafted number 2 in the world, but it was a great experience.
Wow. So, I'm curious about the mindset of a professional athlete. You guys are like the tiniest sliver of humanity on this planet. as a professional athlete, as a world champion, what do you think is different about that part of humanity compared to everyone else?
I think, John, that we all learn it. But the one thing that sports does, and I think everybody on this, listening to this, watching this, is going to agree with us. And that is that sports quickens the learning curve, right? You either learn things quickly in the professional sport or you're gone. They're going to just find someone else. They don't, the most NHL coaches, most NFL, NBA, all those coaches will look at the player and say, I'm here to win. I'm not here to babysit. So it quickens the curve. So I think we all learn it. I'll give you an example. COVID-19, let's make it real to where we're at right now. This is a brilliant time to actually teach resilience because people have context for something that they've just gone through that is not easy. And so at the professional sport level, I think this idea of mental toughness, certainly I think through hard times, we either learn or we lose, we're out, right?
Yeah.
So there's many times, I was part of the worst trade in NHL history. That was the headline in the Montreal Gazette when I landed there. So I had to learn. That affected my performance for a while until I learned and understood the process of not to live somebody else's headline for your life and my life. So yeah, it's really cool. I think we all learn it. And as you know, John, you and I have done some work with your teams together. I get really excited about some of the mindset work that we do, because I think if leaders do not have a high, strong effect on the thinking of their people, they're never going to have the culture that they desire.
Yeah. I love that word resilience. And it almost sounds like you're saying, that professional athletes have this attitude of we either kick its ass or it kicks our ass, one or the other,
Yeah. And that's a learning curve.
So you can blame my oldest son, Cameron, for this question. When I told him that you were going to be my guest, he's a sports junkie like I am. He said, Dad, you got to ask him about this. So most Americans, especially in the South, are neophytes when it comes to hockey. Tell us what a goon is in hockey.
Way to go, Cameron. That's an awesome question. The goon in hockey is the tough guy. So, you look at the other team, your opponent, and you say, okay, they got 2 goons or they got 3 goons. Now, in today's world, there's not a lot of goons. I mean, there's some tough players, but typically NHL teams have got away from the way it was.
Yeah.
In the late 70s, when I played for the Washington Capitals, we went into Philadelphia 6 times and they came into our building 6 times. They were the toughest team in sport. And so I played through that era of, multiple, 2 lines of goal scorers and 2 lines of goons.
So were you a goon?
That's a great question. You ask Cam. I had to scrap, John. I was one of these. I wasn't a big goon. Like, I'm not a big guy, but part of being a player at the highest level in your sport is that you'll stand up for yourself and you stand up for your teammates. And so at times I had to do that for sure. But I had 38 goals in the NHL one year too. So I'm hopefully you wouldn't call me a goon.
So it sounds like they were more worried about getting you the puck and not having you distracted with the other goons.
I can see you like that word now. You're going to be using it all the time.
Oh, I love it. And he told me there's even a movie with Sean William Scott that stars, the guy stars as the movie Goon for some reason. I haven't seen it yet.
They're typically the hockey movies, other than Miracle.
Yeah.
Typically hockey movies, Miracle, Mighty Ducks.
Yeah.
The other ones are all about the tough guy.
Well, listeners, he just made a beautiful segue into my next question. Ryan had a movie role in one of my favorite, probably top 5 sports movies of all time, Miracle, about the 1980 U.S. hockey team. Tell us what the exposure to Hollywood and the movie industry was like.
It was really fun. I had never been behind the scenes in a major motion picture before. Just loved that experience. Disney called one day and asked me if I would be the hockey guy, for the movie, because they wanted to really reflect and honor that 80 team, that 1980 team. So we couldn't take actors and make them athletes. That would take too long.
Yeah.
And with the Mighty Ducks is a great example. I love the movie, but you could see the actors were taught how to skate, and anybody in the hockey industry knows that they weren't, that wasn't the way you skate. That was the way, maybe. Anyway, I'm going to leave it alone. So what they did with Miracle is they hired a bunch of hockey players, and I actually had 700 men try out for 70 spots over a 2-day period.
Wow.
And I fired 600 men in 2 days. That was just awesome.
Wow.
Because we had all these old timers, trying out for the movie. So we got down to 70 players, and we practiced for 3 months. So the Russian team, the U.S. team, all the teams that were going to be in the movies, I had 125 actual plays animated on my computer for the U.S. team, because, Mark Johnson's goal at the end of the first period has to look like Mark Johnson's goal.
Yeah.
We're replicating history. So it was very cool, John. Just love that experience.
Wow. Wow. You still get royalties from that movie? You still get paid for that movie?
I get about $65 every, 3 or 4 months. There you go.
In old Texas language, that's better than a kick in the rump, isn't it?
Exactly.
So what was Kurt Russell like? He's one of my favorite actors. Was he a genuine guy, or was he a jerk?
Kurt Russell is the best of the best. Like he literally, he loves the game of hockey. His son, Wyatt Russell, was actually for a while was a goaltender and played at a pretty high level, not professional, but pretty high. Kurt's a wonderful guy. And he actually wanted to be a baseball player. He didn't start out life wanting to be an actor.
Really?
But I think he's done a pretty good job.
Yeah. I don't know if it was you that told me this, or if I read it or heard it somewhere else, being such a big fan of the movie. I heard that he did a really accurate portrayal of Herb Brooks. Is that true?
That is true. Kurt would be down, with his skates on, and his stick, and he'd be down shooting the puck on a goalie in between sets. And then the director, Gavin O'Connor, would say, "Okay, let's get ready here." And Kurt would come out of the corner, and his head was turned a certain way, and he looked like Herb Brooks. Like he could turn it on and turn it off. And yeah, Kurt, of course, he's a veteran actor. I mean, That's how they do it. But I was amazed at him.
You talk about behaviors and language. I reference the Herb Brooks character a lot in my leadership training. I talk about, how he was one of the guys, but he wasn't one of the guys. He was the coach, and he maintained that role as the coach throughout the movie. And I remember the scene, I think it was the Christmas scene, when they're all at someone's house, and they give him the gift, the whip, and everybody laughs, and I think he drinks his one beer and he says, "Oh, gotta go." So what do you think about the separation that a leader needs to have with their people in order to remain objective?
Yeah, John, it's a great question. And it's, let's use the game of hockey to answer it. That won't surprise you. There's three, in my mind, there's 3 levels or sort of areas of leadership that you have to understand as a leader. Number one is what I would call the captain. And the captain is part of the team. The captain is a player. The captain's in the room. And so your captains would be a little bit like a manager. Let's say you're out on a construction site, and you're one of, right? Like, and yes, you have some influence and you have certain responsibilities, but you're really, one of the team. Then there's the coach, and the coach is not in the room, although the coach goes in the room. The coach is actually in the other room. So they have their own coach's room. And so there's a separation there that you have to respect from coach to player. And that's the hardest thing for a player to make that jump into a coach. And you know, there's times even as an assistant coach of the Vancouver Canucks where, you know, I can see where I would do things different now because I was probably a little more of a player than a coach than I should have been. Then there's the third separation, and that separation is what we call the general manager. So in the world of sport, you have a manager that hires the coach, and the coach, you know, runs a team. And that manager is separated again in the second room. And you know what's fascinating about the manager is the manager doesn't know enough about what's going on in the dressing room. And he only knows what the coach tells him. And so those two separations, you know, from captain to coach and from coach to manager are also very true of the world of business.
Yeah.
And all three of those levels have to make, you know, different decisions. You're right about the coach and the players. The coach is not a player. And you're right about the manager and the players. The manager is not the player. Here's what's funny at the world of hockey right now. You have multi-millionaire players talking to multi-billionaire owners.
Wow.
So what happens now in sport is at times if the player, and they mess up when they do this, is at times the player will go right past the coach and right past the GM, right to the owner. And that really screws up your culture.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Unfortunately, I am a lifelong Dallas Cowboy fan, and I have no doubt that that's going on with Jerry Jones and some of his top players.
Right?
Yeah. So I love that analogy. So what you're saying is, you know, you could equate that to business like, you know, the players are the team members, the coach is the supervisor, and the manager is the general manager in sports. Is that a good comparison?
Yep. Totally. And then in your, if you just keep going there, obviously, and this is where you're going to go, then you've got vice presidents, you've got presidents, you've got CEOs, right? You've got owners of companies. And not saying that there has to be a direct, you know, fall down, a direct line, but there needs to be some understanding of that concept, because I think people's, you know, you can get your nose out of joint pretty quickly if somebody jumps your cue.
Yeah. Yeah. When I was in the military, we call that a chain of command. You have to honor the chain of command. Otherwise you have dysfunction. So here's my question. If Herb Brooks was so good at getting that team to play above their own belief in themselves, do you think that there is still is there still a taste for strong leaders in today's business environment?
Yeah, there is. Like, I think that you know, as Jim Collins said in Good to Great, you know, his level 5 leader, you know, was full of humility and then also full of will.
Yeah.
Right. Those were the two things that he felt, you know, that had to be in a level 5 leader. I think those are wonderful elements, especially when they flow together. And I think that sometimes people only see, you know, the hard side of a leader, and at times, you know, they need to see more humility.
Yeah. And
sometimes people only see the humble side of leaders, and at times they need to see, you know, a little bit more of the will. Leadership's not easy. Leadership is not about doing it my way. Leadership is about getting the best out of the players I have. So we need to know our players. We need to know who needs a little bit of a hard edge, and, you know, who needs a little bit of a pat in the rear end. I think that for me has never changed, you know, through the generations. But I think that leadership is very complex these days, John, you know that. I mean, you know, we do a lot of work around, you know, leadership and communication for sure. how do you communicate as a leader, and what do they hear? Think about words like congruent, right? Think about words like credibility. If a leader doesn't have high credibility, he or she can't lead.
Yeah.
So I think leadership is very, doesn't need to be complex, but if it's not working, and let's put it this way, it can be very complex to try to figure out why.
Yeah. There's a misconception that I addressed in my 2015 book about this belief that you have to teach this millennial generation with soft gloves, that you can't be hard on them, you can't challenge them. And I challenged that notion really through looking at my own son, who played collegiate baseball for a couple of years. And he always responded to the coaches that were tough, as long as he believed they care about him. Do you agree that there's a misconception about how to lead some of these young workers out there?
Yeah, there is. And again, I think that, your son responds to coaching in a certain way, and our sons would respond to coaching in a different way. And I think that there has to be a toolbox full of tools that a leader uses, right? It's not one hammer for everybody. And I think when I grew up in the 70s, I was playing junior hockey in the 70s, a pretty high level of hockey. And my coach was very much one hammer, right? It was never good job. It was never, hey, I really like what you did there. It was just a hammer. And when he wasn't hammering you, you felt good because, he didn't say anything.
Yeah.
So I would agree with you though, John, that there's, I think millennials especially love to know that you've got their back and that you're going to grow them, right? So when you and I are coaching people, it's not all good job, good job, good job. There's a time where we've got to set a vision, and then we got to hold people accountable for that vision.
Yeah.
And if they're not going to put the work in, then, you don't say good job, good job, good job. So I think you're right. I think there's an edge that is important, but it's just one tool. It's not the only tool.
Yeah. Yeah. And I will agree with that. My sense is that a great leader like Herb, he knew his players well enough. And I think I remember from the movie, he actually even studied about the players and knew the ones he wanted before he even had the selection committee, and I think the Olympic committee was upset with him because he kind of knew who he wanted, and he did the personality test. So it wasn't a one size fit all. Totally.
And I love that scene too, where, Herb Brooks is saying that. He said, I got my team picked already.
Yep.
This training camp's just a function for you, not for me.
Yeah, he told the Olympic committee guy, said, I've got my team. I know who I want. It's done. So let's pivot a little bit. We have listeners all over the world on this podcast. How do you help organizations apply what you have learned in your career?
Yeah, thanks, John. I probably fell into this 20, 25 years ago. It's one of those by accident, on purpose things in your life. I'd always been a captain of a team, or, coaching minor hockey, coaching a little bit in the NHL, been a CEO of a company, had a failed company. So, I've always been passionate about leadership. At 45 years old, I'm 62 now, I went back and did a master's degree in leadership business.
Wow.
And I think what that did for me is it just gave me, I was already doing leadership development. I was already doing lots of keynotes, but it gave me the real background to just formalize our training. And so over the years, we've built many models. You and your teams experienced one of our models that we call the 5 mindsets of high performance.
Love that.
And I really, thank you. And I really love building and creating simplicity, and especially around models, because it gives people a visual where people can learn and they can create awareness, and then they can adapt and they can grow. And that's really what we do. We work with CEOs all over the world. As you can imagine, with COVID-19, you and I are pivoting, and I'm doing a lot more personal coaching with CEOs, with presidents, with managers. Certainly, what surprised me a little bit, John, I don't know if this is true for you too, is I have been pleasantly surprised at how well our training is going over Zoom.
Yeah.
And we've built some interactive processes that, so that the Zoom process can actually take on a little bit of character that we want. We believe in interactive training. We don't believe in preaching and listening. And so that idea we wanted to take, across online also. So we're having a blast doing it, and really interested in this, in staying creative during this pivot.
Yeah.
Because we're all in the pivot.
Yeah. Well, I think anybody that has any sense of optimism understands that there's an opportunity in every market, that we just have to look for the opportunities that are in the current reality. And I agree, this Zoom has probably changed my business quite a bit, because I am able to serve so many more companies so much faster because I don't have to travel. I can
Yeah.
meet like this. And now there's some meetings that I prefer face-to-face, tertiary, different activities, but this can work for a lot more than I think most people realize coming into this. So while we're on that topic, let's talk about the global pandemic. What has that been like for you and your family?
Well, I love the way you put that. There's a blessing in every curse. And it has, we went from, having our best training season ever financially to close to zero. So like you, all of a sudden, we're not traveling to do that contract. And the good news is a number of the contracts that we had in place, a number of our clients, not all of them, have allowed us to do sort of double training on Zoom. And so we've been able to sustain those contracts. But it has been a very interesting time, very disappointing time, in the sense that I believe that, business takes time to develop, and it takes no time to ruin.
Yeah. And
so, I have my feelings about, how this happened and why it happened, and I won't get political. But I think the idea is that the blessing is, John, is that we've been out here at our Breakaway retreat center on Thetis Island, and we've been self-isolated with our oldest son, Ben, and his wife, Lindsay, and 3 of our 5 grandkids.
Oh, wow.
So it's been a bit of a blessing in that we have never spent 2 months with grandkids before.
Wow.
And then the second blessing is we're turning, and getting everything put online, and that'll count, that'll start to pay off here soon. And the fourth blessing for us is I'm going to finally finish writing the book.
Yay.
So it's given me time to write the book. So you're right. I mean, this is a huge opportunity. I'll tell you where I think, for me, this opportunity lies. And that is in this idea of interactive training online. Now we're developing and building. We have some IP that I can't give to everybody because we've got to get some trademarks on it. But where people can actually play games, do processes online, and then we debrief them. And that's what we like to do in person, as you experienced. And so we're very excited about that, because that could open up a whole new business.
Yeah. It's so exciting. Do you have a working title for your book yet, or is it still on the down low?
Yeah, no, we're thinking the winning shift. And we'll get into, what does a shift look like in the game of hockey?
You said shift with an F, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Okay.
And then the subtitle you'll like, John, it's navigating. This is sort of what it'll be: navigating the 5 mindsets of performance language, team energy, leadership focus, and game resilience.
I'm going to tell you, folks, I'm a huge fan of his work. He took us through these 5 mindsets, and one of the things that just kind of stuck with me was, and I guess it's one of them. If I get this wrong, help me out, Ryan. But this idea of being in flow when you're at work,
Yeah.
and that it's kind of like being in the zone, the flow zone. Just an amazing book. I'm excited. I'm excited for that book. Do you have a date when you think it might be released?
Well, you're going to push me. I'm hoping by early fall.
Very good. Very good.
Yeah.
So let's get into economics a little bit. We saw the unemployment drop by 2.5 million in the U.S. in May. Are you optimistic about business in general short term?
Short term, I think that I think there will be a comeback for sure. I'm not if you and I look at the business that we do, an in-person training session with 20 to 50 people, I don't see that coming back quickly. Okay. I think that it's going to be staged, unfortunately. I'm actually very concerned for, parts of our world, like, conferences and, tourism and airplanes, hotels. Like, it doesn't feel like this is going to come back very quickly. I've got friends in the tourism industry, and they're planning on 2021, 2022. Hopefully what you and I do over Zoom can be a pivot move that will close that gap and will add to our business, long term. But I'm not a prognosticator. I'm not one that knows the future, but that's what I'm hearing from the CEOs that I talk to.
Yeah, I think there's some wisdom there. So as a Canadian, you are witnessing the protests and riots across the USA. What message do you take from what you are seeing in the United States?
Breaks my heart both ways. I've lived in the U.S. in Washington, D.C., love that city. We do, as you know, John, we do a ton of work in the U.S., and I have all kinds of American friends. Breaks my heart both ways. What happened was wrong, and it can't happen again, for sure. But I also feel like that the people that are protesting, I so honor what they're doing, but I don't honor the thugs.
Yeah.
I think that if you're in this protest to steal liquor from a liquor store, I don't see that as real.
Yeah.
And so I don't care if we're American, Canadian, Chinese, or European. Truth is truth. And so, I feel for the situation. It's very, very sad. And I hope that everything can not get back to normal. There has to be change. But I'm hoping that things can stabilize. And we want to be, part of the healing, of your culture and of our culture up here in Canada.
Yeah. I wrote an article that went out today, and I made the point that hate is hard to sustain. Love is going to find a way. Love will find a way back. I mean, there's just so much good in humanity. And I compare what we're going through in the United States to like a human seizure. The country is in a seizure right now, and the seizures are temporary. They're awful. They're terrible, but they are temporary. And if you're infectiously optimistic like I am, love is going to find a way. I even talked to another Canadian guy in Vancouver, and we were talking about whether touch will come back. And I said, human touch is going to come back. We're going to hug each other again. I think it's just too much for us to give up, because it's something we need. We need to be able to give a hug. I was at a funeral 2 weeks ago, and I gave the widow a hug when she offered me a hug. I just couldn't help it.
Yeah.
It was just, I just don't think we're going to live in perpetual fear of this virus, even if it doesn't go away.
We agree.
All right. So let's shift again. Let's say a CEO listening, and she needs help with her team. How does she find Ryan Walter?
Well, you are a very kind man, John. Thank you. I think I love just, really being transparent with people. RyanWalter.com if you go to the contact place, is a great spot to start. I fire my email at people, just Ryan@RyanWalter.com. I love email. I think it's an easy way to do it. And as I've said to many of the CEOs that you work with, John, I am wide open. If the goal is not to use Ryan, to train your people, if I'm not the right guy, if John's the right guy, then you need to use John. But I would love to have a conversation with people, and maybe there's a way that we can, even over an email or a phone call, just do a needs assessment and see if I'm the right person or if we're the right organization. And if so, we'd love to help out. And if not, we can give references to, John or others. And so those are the two places. Cell phone is 604-996-4446. And nobody will remember that, but you will remember Ryan at ryanwalter.com.
Ryan at ryanwalter.com. That's no S, ryanwalter.com. Now, Ryan, you said something kind about training businesses. I've been in the training world for 18 years. And one thing that I've never done, and I don't know how some people that are in our line of work that live to help other people, I've never seen other trainers as competitors. I've always seen them as someone that could complement the outcomes for the people that we serve. It's always the pie is never too small in my world. Do you agree with that?
I agree with that, John. And I think that what you point to is an abundance mindset. Mm-hmm. Versus the restrictive, I got to get my piece of the pie. I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
And I think the beauty of this industry is that's how we learn from each other. That's how we reference each other's work and support each other. So I think this is a really cool time in the training industry for us to get together and support each other, because we've got lots of our friends hurting.
Yeah. So you don't know this, but this year will be my 30th wedding anniversary, and I am really thinking about a major trip this year, somewhere that I can now afford, because prices should be a lot cheaper than they were in previous years. You shared some pictures about your beautiful corporate retreat that you have. Tell our listeners around the world about that place of discovery you created.
Thank you. And we got to get you and your wife up, John. That'd be so cool. It's called, people can go to the break. If you just Google Breakaway and Ryan Walter, we call it the Breakaway Retreat Center. And it's on Thetis Island, Thetis, up in British Columbia. And we're a 20-minute float plane off of Vancouver, off of YBR, where you fly into Vancouver. And John, we just love it here. We are so fortunate. We're 2,500 feet of deck on the Pacific Ocean.
Wow.
We've got room for 8 executives right now, 12 we hope coming up. And right out the side here, I've got our dock and our boat, and so we take tours and we fish for salmon, and we'll get you some crab and some prawns for dinner. So
wow.
Life is awesome here. It's also a great place to train leaders. And so we do a lot of 3-day training, 4-day training, and it really gives us that in nature feel where, science is starting to say that a lot of great training happens when we can get away, put the phone down, have a new context in a new atmosphere. And that's when we really retain things and we can have a new perspective on life. And so we're doing stuff right from training CEOs, John, right to marriage weekend.
Oh, wow.
And that's been really powerful.
Wow. Well, I just can't imagine. You don't know this, and I'm surprising you with this, but I recently did a podcast with the most interesting man in the world in Vancouver, Canada, a gentleman named Chris Hardwick. Do you know that name?
I know of Chris, but I don't know Chris.
Okay. We were on my podcast. He mentioned mindset and future positive and future negative. And I thought maybe you two had crossed paths, that maybe you'd worked with his groups or something. But I told him I fell in love with Vancouver in that area. I went there for business about, 15 years ago. and I fell in love with it so much. I said, I've got to bring my wife here. So we went back the next year, and I just love that area. Flew in one of those float planes over the beauty of, the islands, and it's just an amazing place. So you're so fortunate to live there. Have you always lived there? Or is that the place where you chose to live after your hockey career, or how did you end up
Yeah,
there?
we ended up playing for the Vancouver Canucks. So we came back, and then we, grew our 4 kids, and then we had another little one in Vancouver, our little Emma. And so we've stayed. We haven't always been on the island here. We've been in different homes in the Lower Mainland, which is in Vancouver. But we've really enjoyed this area.
Yeah. Yeah, I was there last year to speak with Chris's CEO groups, and he took me skiing on Whistler and Blackcomb. Are you a
Isn't that beautiful?
skier or snowboarder?
I'm not. I've got a new left hip, but
Oh.
and now that you mentioned Chris, I know I've worked with Chris. I know Chris. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, he is one of the funniest guys I know, and I just consider him a dear friend. And the story goes, I haven't snowboarded in 4 or 5 years, and I never learned to ski. I only learned to snowboard. And my brother-in-law took me up on the mountains of California and said, "You need to learn from the top," and just pushed me and my son down, and we figured out how to snowboard. Well, I hadn't done that in years, and Chris said, "Come a day early, and we'll go to Whistler." So we go to Whistler, and I get my snowboard on, and I'm really uncomfortable. Needless to say, I took a left and went down a slope that I shouldn't have gone down, and
Uh-oh.
I didn't get injured, but I sure thought I was likely to die on that mountain that day. And it was my 4th run, and I was done for the day.
Yeah.
I said, "Chris, we should have done this on the back end of the training, not the front end, because I was so sore all week.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah.
my core, it's just, but a beautiful memory."
Well, now you know why I don't do it, John. There you go.
But listeners, I don't know that I've ever seen something more beautiful, maybe as beautiful
Yeah.
as that ride on the gondola between Whistler and Blackcomb. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, it's just amazing, amazing. So
A beautiful part of the country, and it's got great trout fishing up there too.
So, and what was interesting to me is that many of the people that live in Vancouver are not from Vancouver. It's so beautiful that it attracts people from all over the world.
Yeah, that's very true.
All right. So tell us one more time, how do we find Ryan Walter?
RyanWalter.com, and send me a note there. Ryan@RyanWalter.com. Send me an email directly. And I'd love to offer your listeners, your viewers, I'd love to offer you and them our latest book. It's called Hungry, Fueling Your Best Game. And I'd love if the people that are listening in, John, would send me a quick email, and I'll fire you the PDF of that book quickly back.
Okay.
And I'd love to offer a free gift to your people.
Ryan@RyanWalter.com. If you want that free book, you won't regret it, people. He is just a great guy, and he's got such an inspiring message all the way from being an athlete and what that was like to making the shift into the corporate world and being a CEO and going through struggles and learning from struggles. Just a great guy to give you a lot of experience about life. So Ryan, thank you so much. If you're going to give listeners one departing message, what would that be?
Number one thing, be aware of the mindset that you take into your day. And with that awareness, and that's the work we do, make sure that you have a mindset that you decide to have instead of a mindset that you're reacting with. I think that's the key. It all comes. An old timer by the name of Aristotle said this. He said, thoughts are causes.
Wow.
And so that drives our whole day.
Love that. So listeners, we are crazy enough to go big. Who would have thought a guy in his 50s could start an award-winning podcast and have guests like Ryan Walter on his show? What an honor to have you on the show. Listeners, we go big here. We don't play small ball. We take chances. We are crazy enough to win. Until next time.